Good morning, everybody. Pastor Paul here on a Friday morning, January 10th, 2025. So glad that you've joined us for our last round of devotionals for this week. We have been walking through Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verses 1 through 11. This, of course, is the scripture passage that we are going to be diving into together this Sunday as we start this new series on Ecclesiastes. And so we are excited about doing that. I'm excited about doing that. But we have been walking through this prologue, this introduction to this text this week, and we want to draw that discussion to a close. So first of all, let me read the passage, and then let's dig in together. Ecclesiastes 1, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities. All is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes round to the north. Around and round goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they will flow again. All things are full of weariness, a man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has been already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things, yet to be among those who come after. And what we've really seen this week, in short, is a man and his misery. So the man, of course, is Solomon. And he has come to the end of his life, and he is reflecting back on the choices he's made and the things of this earth lived under the sun by which he has sought meaning and purpose and happiness and joy, and how it's all sort of exploded into his face because he sought these things apart from a fear of the Lord, apart from a committed, obedient relationship to what God had told him to do. And we've seen this week also, there's sort of three themes that we find in these initial verses that are going to be themes Solomon returns to again and again. And that's, first of all, the theme of seasons being those repetitive, predictive cycles of human life that continue on and on and on, even as people go and fade from the scene. We've talked about this idea of under the sun. That just simply means living life apart from this transcendent reality of God's glory and God's presence. And then ultimately, this all leads to the third idea we've talked about. That's vanity. That Solomon declares all is vanity, all is futility, all is meaningless, all is a vapor. And he says this based upon the fact that a life lived among all its seasons, under the sun versus under God, is a life that holds no meaning. It holds no purpose. It's like a mist. It's like a vapor. Now, this could seem like an introductory philosophy 101 class at FSU if we were just to sort of take those nuggets and not move past them. But that's not what Solomon does. He spends the majority of the book unpacking those, looking at those, the futility of those, of that doctrine of life apart from God, because he's driving us to an ultimate conclusion. He's driving us to a place, to a different place, a place that he did not live for the majority of his life. Even as at the end of his life, it seems that he's coming back around to a central idea. And what is this central idea? turn back or forward into Ecclesiastes to the very last chapter, chapter 8. And the last two verses, and again, this is like a bookend to the first 11 verses because they give us the sense of what Solomon is wanting us to do with all of this knowledge, about all of this knowledge of ourselves and of the world and futility and seasons and meaninglessness and vanity and under the sun. And here is what he says. Verse 13, chapter 12. The end of the matter comes to the end of the book. All has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. Solomon says, here's the essence of wisdom. Here's the essence of whether or not you've really gotten the message of Ecclesiastes. Are you brought back around to the idea that despite the futilities of this life, despite its limitations, its brokenness, are you still pursuing meaning apart from God? Or do you not see that the futility of this life is meant to drive you closer and closer to God, to show you where your only hope is? Fear God. So that's something that's always crucial as we study Ecclesiastes, because a lot of times you can take nuggets of Ecclesiastes and they seem particularly dark and despairing, or they might be twisted to mean something that they don't mean when you look at the scope of the book as a whole. And it seems that it's really the book of Ecclesiastes that the Apostle Paul is reflecting on when in Romans chapter 8, he talks about the fallenness of the world. So I want you to turn over to Romans chapter 8, because this really gives us the New Testament perspective on what Solomon is going to be teaching us over the next 12 weeks. Listen to what the Apostle Paul says. This is verse 18 of chapter 8. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. Now listen to this. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope. Now let me stop there. When Paul says the creation was subjected to futility, it's that same word for vanity, for meaninglessness. In other words, Paul says because of sin that entered the world, the earth no longer possesses, or let me put it a different way. Because of sin that has entered the world, man no longer has the capacity to enjoy the world and the creation that God has given in the way that God intended it. Okay, that the things that God gave Adam and Eve in the garden, like work, like marriage and sexuality, like worship, like leisure, like rest, all of these things that were a part of the original created order are no longer going to be, no longer are going to be the same kind of source for joy that pointed people to God. They were going to be twisted. They were going to be broken. They were going to become places, instead of finding joy and satisfaction, people found conflict and division and unrest. And not that they didn't bring pleasure, not that they can't bring pleasure in short bursts for specific periods of time, but it doesn't last. Why? Because the creation, Paul says, has been subjected to futility. In other words, it's God who has subjected it, right? Yes, man has made this breach with God, but it is God who has subjected it. Now, and we're going to find out why. Verse 21, that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. And not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we were saved. Now, hope that is seen is not hope, for who hopes for what he sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. What Paul is simply saying is that the futility, the frustration, the meaninglessness that we can experience in this life is meant to point us and drive us back to Jesus. The futility and frustration we experience with our own bodies, it's meant to drive us back to Jesus. And this doesn't mean, by the way, that we can't enjoy this life and find meaning in this life, okay? Doug Wilson uses this illustration that God has given a can of peaches, proverbially, to each and every person in the world, but it's only to the Christian that he's given the can opener, right? So in other words, God's given peaches to everyone. He's given the good gifts of creation, yet those who don't know Christ don't have the capacity to enjoy those peaches in the way God intended because they can't open the can. They can't access the gifts in the correct way. So they eat the can, or they cut their tongue and fingers trying to pry the can open. They substitute the can for other things. You know, the analogy could go on and on and on, right? But believers now have the capacity to enjoy God's gifts in creation, the same ones we saw in the garden, but in a way that doesn't make them ultimate, but in a way that points this back to Jesus. So again, Paul is sort of riffing here on Ecclesiastes to remind us why God has given us the gift, I'm putting that in quotes, of futility in this life. If he had not subjected the creation to futility, we might be satisfied with it. And that would be a tragedy of a cosmic order, because then we would not ever see our need for Jesus. And that, my friend, is the driving lesson of Ecclesiastes. Okay, that's it for this week. We'll be back here Monday, delving into the intricacies of Solomon's life and experiences, tracking how he has been living his life under the sun, and again, learning with him along the way. All right, thanks for joining us this week. Let me pray. Father, thank you that you don't allow us to find ultimate joy apart from you, else we would never seek after you. But Lord, thank you for the gift of futility. And Lord, let it drive us ever closer